Welcome back to News Diary. I want us to now listen to an interview that was done by Spice FM with the British High Commissioner Neil Wigan, of course, with the coming of King Charles and Queen Camilla next week. Let's listen in.
Good. On a scale of 1 to 10, you're at 11.
Voila.
Yes.
It's good advice for a diplomat.
Better to stumble on your toes than to stumble on your tongue. What's your direct interpretation of it? Or what do you think this proverb is saying?
So that you can make physical mistakes, that's fine, but what you say really matters and has an impact, and that's important. And really, as a diplomat, that's what I get paid to do, is to make sure that I say the right thing.
Is that what they trained you?
They tried
First
to.
lesson, first day of diplomat school. Harry Kujikwa.
We should have it as the crest of the Diplomatic Academy, I think, the new motto.
Yeah, you know. Yesterday when we were expecting you to be here yesterday, unfortunately you couldn't make it because you had another engagement. But here you are. When you talked about it, CT said, his name is Wigan. There's a football club called Wigan Athletic. Maybe this is the owner of the club. And they said, we're going to ask.
There's a rugby club.
There's also a rugby club.
So sadly, the football club is not doing well at the moment. The rugby club is doing better. And there's the book by George Orwell, so you can refer to that.
All right. And all of them three are you?
I'm named after the town. The town's not named after me.
Therefore, there's even a town.
There's even a town. Karibu sana to Kenya. You've been here a couple of months now, having been posted into this country. How do you find it so far?
So far, so good. So Kenya's not new to me. I was ambassador to Somalia about 10 years ago, so my family lived in Nairobi. So Nairobi was always where I came for a break from Somalia. So my children, really their first memories of Kenya. They loved growing up here. My wife had a great time here. So we're really delighted to be back. But it's very different to live and work in a country than to come as a visitor. So I'm trying to get out a bit and get out of Nairobi and see a bit as much of Kenya as I can.
So 10 years ago, you were in Somalia as the representative of the UK government. From there, where did you go?
So after Somalia, I went to be the Africa Director in London, so I was covering the whole of Africa from London. And in fact, Kenya was the country that I came to most doing that job because of what an important partner it is for us. And then after that, I was the ambassador to Israel for 4 years.
Hey. They send you to all these places.
They send me to, and I was in Congo before, so I get a good mix of countries. I won't tell you which is the reward and which is the...
No, it'll come out through the course of this conversation. So let's get straight into it. The announcement that the King Charles III and Queen Camilla will be coming into the country next week. And this is going to be the first visit to a Commonwealth country. Why is it important?
So it's a big deal. It's, as you say, it's their first visit to a Commonwealth country. It's their first visit to any country outside Europe as king. And so the fact that they chose Kenya is a big deal. There's a very close family relationship with Kenya. As you know, the king's mother became queen in Kenya in 1952. The king has visited Kenya 4 times as the Prince of Wales. His son got engaged to his wife here, so there's a very strong family connection. But also the relationship between the two countries is extremely strong, and I was with President Ruto yesterday, and we were discussing that strength. And we see Kenya as a key partner for everything that we're trying to do, from the environment and climate change to tackling counter-terrorism, and we want to use the visit to show that cooperation.
There's a lot that has changed in Kenya since 1952, obviously, and one can say maybe that's one of the events that really, could suggest that the two countries cemented somehow. A lot has changed between that time and today. What are some things that you would say then would be hoped to realize through this visit that will happen?
So I think that point of change is really important. So we have a really long and deep history, but we really want to talk about where the relationship is now and what we want to do together in the future. So the themes that we've picked for the visit are around youth, they're around innovation, and it's around the environment. And those are all big forward-looking themes. And it's to show how we, so for example, we're taking the King to see Kenyan technology companies, because there's some really amazing innovation, whether it's in climate change or financial technology and so on, which shows how much Kenya has to offer the world. And then when it comes to climate change itself, we had the Africa Climate Summit here in Nairobi a few weeks ago. So we're looking at everything from that global scale, but also how you get communities involved in conservation at the local level, including at the coast. And that's something that the King, who's been passionate about climate change and environment for decades, he really wants to see some of the lessons that we can learn from Kenya.
Something that I've always found not perplexing, intriguing. What exactly does a king do? I mean, I know what a president does. I have an idea what a prime minister does or doesn't do. But in a country where you have a prime minister, you have a parliament, then you have a king, what does the king do?
So he's the ceremonial head of state. So he doesn't make policy. As you say, the prime minister and the government, they do that. The parliament makes all the laws. But the king sort of represents the British people. And so the fact that he's coming to Kenya is a symbol of the connection that we want to have between the British people and the Kenyan people. He's the symbol of the state. And of course, you know, in Britain, we have a huge amount of affection and respect for the monarchy. And you saw that when the late Queen died, and then at the coronation of the King, just this huge popular enthusiasm, not only in Britain, but really across the whole world, and that respect for the royal family. So they mean something, they sum up the nation at home and around the world. Explain that a little bit more, because all your neighbors, whether it's France, Germany, they had kings or something of that sort at some point or the other. Some even had an emperor. But somehow, not only did they diminish, one doesn't even talk about them. What is it about the British people and this holding on to this monarchy? So I think it's partly continuity. I mean, really, this is the same royal family which has gone through revolutions, it's gone through changes, but for 800 or 900 years. So they've always been there. So whether it's through the difficult times in the Second World War, where they really helped maintain the morale of the nation, through all the changes that we've been through the last 80 years, the royal family has always been there as a sort of a constant, solid symbol. And then around the world, there's something about sort of saying the King of Great Britain that has a magic and an impact which nobody else really, presidents don't do. There's something about a king which makes people feel this is something really special and important. You're right. It's a good question. I mean, I honestly don't know the answer, but it's there. There's something different and special about a king. You see, why I find it intriguing is that there are nations that form part of what we call the Commonwealth, and some of them are essentially independent states, but the Queen, the King, still the sovereign leader of those nations. Now, it's the intriguing part of all this. And yet, in everything else, they're fairly independent. But they still acknowledge the king now as a sovereign. So not all members of the Commonwealth do have the king as a sovereign. So Kenya being a really good example, Kenya is a full republic, but is still a member of the Commonwealth, and we really want to celebrate that link to the Commonwealth during the visit. But yes, there are some other countries which still have the king as the formal head of state. I'd say again, it's a very ceremonial position, and it's the decision of those countries. They've decided that for whatever reason, this is something that they like to have in a way. Again, because of this magic dust somehow that the British royal family has.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are clouds that still linger from colonialism, right? And the visit by the King and the Queen coming to Kenya would spur some of those conversations to come into the limelight. And the things that happened in Kenya as a result of colonialism, still some very fresh wounds, some scars today. Would those things come out in conversation today when in relation to a visit by the monarchy to a former colony, and how that plays out in a relationship today? Do those things come out in conversation? People are more aware of what happened during those times, and people are having conversations about them, real conversations about them today, and talk about injustices and talk about reparations that should be made, or at least considered. Do those things come out, and are they well front and center for the monarchy as well?
Yes, so we will definitely address and acknowledge those issues during the visit. As I said, we'll be focused on celebrating the present and talking about what we do together in the future. But we think it's really important that we address openly what happened in the past. And because the relationship is so strong, we think we can do that clearly and openly. And this is something that the King has a very strong personal interest in. In his other trips, when he was as Prince of Wales, he's spoken very openly about issues like slavery and the terrible crime that was. In Kenya, we have expressed deep regret for what happened during the emergency period and the treatment of Mau Mau in particular, and we made an out-of-court settlement to some of those people. And while I've been here, I've made an effort myself to go and visit communities and individuals and families who were affected by that period to make sure that I understand that better myself. And I've been hugely impressed. People talk very openly about what happened in the colonial period, whether that was right at the beginning or during the Mau Mau period as well. And a lot of them are also very focused on the future, but they appreciate the fact that I come and talk to them about that openly and that I show an interest in learning. And I think the King will come very much in that spirit as well.
The British government has, like you've said, previously acknowledged and expressed deep regret over what happened. Deep regret is not an apology.
No, so we choose the language carefully. We expressed deep regret. We said it in Parliament, so we said it in the most public way. We've engaged very closely with the Mau Mau veterans who were affected, and we not only paid compensation individually, but also we helped arrange for the monument, which now sits in Uhuru Park. So we've been very open about those difficult bits of our history.
Why fall short of making an apology?
So we haven't made an apology really in any context. It's an extremely difficult thing to do. So what we think we want to do is we want to acknowledge the difficult bits of history. We want to talk about them openly, both to the countries which were affected, but also, as I say, to the individuals and communities.
What's difficult about making an apology?
So an apology starts to take you into difficult legal territory. And so, as I say, the settlement that we made was an out-of-court settlement, so it showed our sincerity and our desire and our openness about recognising that abuses had been committed. But that was the route that we chose and was accepted by the Mau Mau Veterans Association.
Okay. So during the visit here, their Majesties will, from the statement that was made by the High Commission, they'll acknowledge the more painful aspects of the UK and Kenya shared history, including the emergency period, 1952 to 1960. His Majesty will take time during the visit to deepen his understanding of the wrongs suffered in this period by the people of Kenya. Together, their Majesties will tour the new museum dedicated to Kenya's history and lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown warrior at Uhuru Gardens, as well as visit the site of the declaration of Kenya's independence in 1963. The words here, to deepen his understanding of the wrongs suffered in this period. What does that mean?
So firstly, he will go to the museum, and that's where Kenya tells its own history about what happened in that period, and he'll see how it's told, but also he'll meet Kenyans who are learning about their history, school children. So he'll understand both what happened, but also how it's taught to Kenyans and how Kenyans perceive it today. The symbolism of him going to the place where the Kenyan flag was raised for the first time, and his father was present at that very important ceremony, again shows us sort of engaging very clearly and positively with that history. And there may be opportunities as well for him to meet people who can talk about how their communities were affected, or how their families were affected, or how they themselves were personally affected during the British period. And as I say, His Majesty has a very deep and sincere desire to understand these things better.
And then what? Then what after understanding? So he is going to have a deep understanding of what happened. What do you expect him to do after that?
So part of this goes back to what we were talking to CT about. So he's not the head of state. He doesn't make policy. I think he will talk about this openly, and we hope the fact that him talking about these issues openly will, for those communities and for the normal Kenyans, will be an important symbolic moment. But then it's a decision for the British government to say, as we engage with a particular community or a particular group and we hear what their requests are, whether there is something that we can do to help. In many cases, their requests are actually more for the Kenyan government than they are for the British government, but we'll see if there are things that we can do.
these are definitely choppy diplomatic waters, because history, unfortunately, as it is taught, may not necessarily represent the truth to many people. It's just history. Now, the history of Kenya and the British, if I'm to come to the present, again, an intriguing and unique occurrence. When you have a relationship that began with colonization and then now ends up with partnerships, what does it say about the two peoples of these countries? Is it that they're able to forget the past, or that they're able to bridge the differences that they have, or they're able to stare the truth of their histories clearly in the face and say, folks, the best way forward ought to be this? And if so, are you suggesting that this visit by His Majesty is one such symbol?
Yes. So I'm a historian by background, so this is my pet subject, and I could talk about it for far too long.
You're in good company.
I do think the present of the relationship between Britain and Kenya is hugely affected by the history, and it's really important that we understand that. But as I said before, I think we're now at a stage where the relationship is good, so we can talk very openly about some of these very difficult and painful issues. We do think that the partnership is much more about future-leading issues. So as I said, we're going to be talking about technology, we're going to be talking about innovation, we're going to be introducing the King to Kenyan fashion designers and artists and so on. So he really sees what that future is, and that's what we think we should be focused on. But we absolutely understand that we need to understand the history, and we hope that the symbolism of the King, the symbol of the British people, talking about these issues and going to particular places, we hope that will mean a lot to Kenyans.
The symbolism often represents reality, because it's like someone showing you a 3D picture. Instead of you imagining it, you're told, have a look and see. But moving forward, maybe this isn't quite your domain, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
That's a dangerous position.
No, it's nothing horrific. I'm thinking of the relationship that Kenya has had with Britain over the years, and I'm looking at how it is many Kenyans, the fact that we're speaking this language, identify with what it is that is predominantly British. Now, moving forward, do you think that it is the business and the interest of the government of the day in Britain to actually understand what it is that what we call the common person in this country considers to be in their interest?
Yes.
Not what the politicians tell them.
So, yes, absolutely. But then I would say, the average Kenyan, I think, is 19 years old. So for them, a lot of what happened in history very much is history. And when I talk to younger Kenyans, they're interested in, can they study in the UK? Can they work in the UK? Can they get a job working for a British company? So they're very much focused on the future and what can we do together. And that's very much what we want to do and what we want to focus on. And I think the fact that the King is going to come and he is going to be talking about these issues. He's going to look at Kenyan fashion designers. He's going to see the successes that Kenya has. And I think that will symbolize how much the relationship has changed from when his mother became queen, when Kenya was still part of the British Empire, when his father came with Jomo Kenyatta to celebrate Kenya's independence. But now we're in a world where we're working together, for example, on training Kenyan Marines who are being trained by the British Royal Marines, and the King was himself did the British Royal Marine training course, and we're working with them so that we can face common threats like terrorism together. And I think that will really symbolize how much the relationship has changed.
Let's take a break and then we continue the conversation shortly. We are hosting Neil Wigan. He is the British High Commissioner to Kenya. He's here as we talk about the planned visit by King Charles III and Queen Camilla next week on Tuesday the 31st. They'll be in the country until the 3rd of November. That's Friday. what's expected after this trip, what is the itinerary. I'm going to read some of what the King and Queen are going to be doing. Their Majesties will be greeted in Nairobi with a ceremonial welcome at State House, and they'll each attend bilateral meetings, the King with the President and the Queen with the First Lady, and then the President will host a state banquet at State House. Then His Majesty will visit the United Nations office in Nairobi. He'll attend a technology showcase, meeting Kenyan entrepreneurs. He'll host a reception focused on Kenya's young people. Their Majesties will visit a Commonwealth War Graves Commission cemetery, and very many other things that they'll be doing. That's what we're discussing with the High Commissioner. Keep it here. We'll be back shortly after this break.
This is the